Hey, welcome everybody. I hope this is working now. I think it is. This is my first time to do a simulcast live stream to 3 places at once. So hopefully you can hear me and see me. I'm just going to check. That's a little bit loud probably because I've got the lapel mic on. Let's just have a quick look. Yep. Maybe I'll turn it down a little bit. Yeah, so I'm going to be answering some subscribers' questions. And I've never used this program before to do all these things at once. So hopefully you can see me on YouTube. Let's have a quick look at the comments and see if I can see everything there. Sure that it's working. I don't know if it is working. So this is kind of a little test, and what I thought I would do is answer some subscribers' questions about. I've had a couple of people ask me about raw foods. I recently did a video called "When is raw food?" Oh, that's a fail. To have your phone on. I think Twitch is working because it sent me a notification. And welcome to people that are on Twitch because this is the first time for me to use Twitch. So I thought this would be a good time of the night to do it because it's night for me, but a lot of people that watch my channel on YouTube are in the US. So welcome. So if you have a question or a comment about particularly a question, or you want to chime into the conversation, you can do that. And on these streams, what's even greater is people can jump in on the stream as well. I can send you a code and you can jump in and have a chat if you feel like doing that. And that'll be something interesting to do in the future, possibly. And so, yeah. So I'm going to answer this question first off about the raw foods. I'm just trying to find the question here. So I've got one about this person says, how would you suggest incorporating more fruit into the diet? I live in a cold climate and my TCM practitioner told me to have warm cooked foods for a poor digestive system, but I don't know how to manage this when it comes to fruit. Now that's a big question, a big common thing. I'm just going to check. I can't see anything that I'm live on YouTube. It's not doesn't seem to be notifying me. I don't think it's working. Unless it's like super duper delayed. I can see 2 people are on, but I don't know where they're here from. Facebook and so YouTube is working. It must be working. Yeah, just bizarre that I didn't see any notification. So, yep. All right, good. Well, if you're here from YouTube, put your put a comment in the comments, and then I can see that the comments are working. So this raw food question. How do you incorporate cooked foods? How do you incorporate fruit into a mostly cooked foods diet? Well, one answer is just to cook the fruit, right? And I know that sounds really bizarre, and I might have even mentioned this on that video that I made about the raw foods and stuff. Is that like I've seen Chinese cook lettuce in China, and so you don't have to cook everything, but it's more about a balance of what you're having. So you don't want to have things to such a detriment that it affects your lifestyle so badly that you feel like you can't live well in society. Because food is a big part of your well-being and a big part of your happiness, I think. And so that's something to kind of consider as part of the balance of all this. And the key thing when I read some of these questions, I just want to reiterate to people what's great about Chinese medicine, why I love it so much, is it is about that balance. Like there are extremes of the scales, but there's always a balance. And what that means is, okay, we know that food can have, like anything can have detrimental effects. Too much water can kill you if you have too much, right? And so you want to be able to have a balance of stuff. So if your body's severely damaged, let's say, or deficient, and you're really, really, really struggling, and you're going through a period where you want to like nourish. I'm just going to see if I can continue this on YouTube and see what's happening here. Right. Oh, it is working on YouTube. That's good. I'm going to do this at the detriment of possibly. Okay, it is working. Just tested the audio on there. Look, there's no way to test this other than just test it out. So there we go. So yeah, back to that question about the raw foods. So, and this was on the recent video that I made because I know a lot of people watch these after the fact. Is that it's not. It doesn't have. You don't have to have like the idea is eat mostly cooked foods most of the time. So that doesn't mean eat all cooked foods all of the time. It means you can have some raw stuff. And I think you have to just balance out, okay, if you're like what I was saying before is if you're really severely malnourished or your spleen chi is very weak. And so how would you know that? Because your bowels are loose and you're feeling like really tired and maybe your practitioner said that's what's wrong. But particularly your bowels aren't properly formed or something like that, then you might go through a period of even just a week, let's say, or 2 weeks, where you just say, right, I'm not having any raw. I'm just going to have all cooked. And so in that case, you might not have any fruit for that time, but that's not forever. And then once you start to introduce fruit, let's say if you really, really love fruit, well, that could be your raw food. Instead of having lots of salad, you could have fruit. Things that cook very easily are like pears. Bananas don't need to be cooked at all, really. They could be eaten raw and they're not as dampening in terms of their. Okay, so one thing to think about with fruit and dampness is if it's very, very sweet and citrusy, citrus and sweet combined together is the most dampening of fruits. And, oh, I'm not sure what that little sound was. Possibly a good sound. I'm not sure. Please put your comments in the comments if you'd like to, if you'd like to, so if you feel so inclined. Trying to do something where I can capture people who, or reach out to people who are overseas because I'm in Perth, Australia. It's quite late at night tonight. Well, not quite late. It's like 10 p.m. But I was feeling in the mood for this, and I've been trying to test this system out and see what would work. So currently we're streaming to Facebook, to Twitch, and to Facebook, to YouTube all at the same time. The wonders of technology. So this raw foods idea is like, so let's say to answer this question about how would I incorporate fruits in my diet. So you could start by having some fruits and just having them cooked. So how would you do that? Well, you could stew or steam. So pears and apples are really good for doing this. Now, if you have dryness in your throat, if you talk a lot, which I tend to do. Hello, glamour girl Holly. Hi, nice to see you. Thanks for letting me know you're someone's listening. So if you steam or you stew those fruits, then it takes away some of that, well, it takes away some of the rawness, but it then makes it easier to digest, and so that makes it technically less kind of dampening. And this is what you do for kids and babies, right? So when they're weaning off of their standard diet, you would tend to slowly ease in, hopefully, mostly cooked foods and mixing those cooked foods in with stuff that they easily already can digest. So things like mixing the fruits in with porridge. So that would be another idea for you if you want to have some fruits because you want the nutrient from the fruit, but you don't necessarily want the rawness or love the raw taste of it, is to have something like a cooked, let's say you had a cooked porridge, like you could have an oaty porridge, or you could have anything like rice porridge, congee, something like that. And you have a little bit of raw fruit, and you cut it very finely or thinly, and you just put that on top, and cinnamon or something like that. This is, like you could imagine a cinnamon and apple rice porridge. That'd be delicious. Pears it makes a really good congee. So you could cook those foods up with the congee overnight or in the long time, like the 7 hours cooking if you want, or you can just add them in at the end. And that heat kind of partially cooks it, just warms it. And then the other option is like, let's say your bowels and your body's your gut health is getting better, and you're just thinking, okay, I'm going to slowly start to introduce the fruit. Don't have like a big bowl of fruit the first day. Just have one thing and see how you go. And then did that change? Did you experience heaps of detriment, or was it good? Were your bowels still properly formed? Did you have bloating, or your guts kind of feeling like sore or something like that? Awesome. Thank you so much for your question, Glamour Girl Holly. So hopefully that answers the question that was asked on one of my videos about the raw foods, and that was about fruits. So this one, Glamour Girl Holly says, let me see. I'm so interested in, oh, I love this. I just got this new technology and it can put this thing on the screen. I'm so interested in traditional Chinese medicine. I'd love to have a diagnosis. Is there anything in particular I should look for in a Chinese doctor? Well, that's a great question. So I did make a video, and I made two videos on this channel. One was very long-winded. This is what happens usually. I try to make a short video, a 5-minute video, and it turns into a 25 or 30-minute video. On things you should look for in a practitioner, one in a herbalist and one in an acupuncturist, and some of those things are the same. So maybe if you could tell me what country you're in, don't tell me your suburb or anything too more personal, because there's different laws that govern different areas, and that would influence on how you could find someone. But in general, if there's some countries have registration, because some people watching this might have the same kind of question and they're not sure. So some countries have a formal registration system like we have in Australia, but prior to that, like we've only had that for like 6 or 7 years. And then other than that, you might have what's called a self-regulated system. So in the UK, right? So you kind of have a self-regulated system when it comes to Chinese medicine and acupuncture. And so what that means is like associations set themselves up and say, right, we're going to govern, like in a way, self-regulate. So what that means is they'll say, right, practitioners who want to join us can pay some money and join up with us. And then you kind of have this blanket thing of like, well, we're all reputable in some way because we all follow like a code of ethics. We all might follow, certain set of guidelines. We all adhere to hygienic standards and things like that. Because one of the biggest things people worry about in unregulated countries of these professions is, well, are the needles going to be clean? Are they going to use some weird medicine on me that's not, like, who knows where it came from? Like, how do they know? Who's checking on that sort of stuff? And so on one hand, you're sort of trusting in the goodness of humanity, the goodness of the person to sort of, do the right thing, let's say. And secondly, on the other hand, it's highly unlikely that people in this kind of profession that are in self-employment are going to do the wrong thing, because it only will ever come back to bite them on the butt. Like, it will only ever hurt them, because especially now with social media, people put a bad review on their page and then next thing you know, no one's wanting to kind of come back and see them. So press on that, it'll go away. Still working out how to use this thing. So how do you find a good practitioner? So if you're going to have acupuncture, particularly versus Chinese herbal medicine, then you want to definitely make sure someone's nearby you. You don't want them to be too far away, because you have to physically go there for the treatment. And that takes up a lot of time out of your schedule if this is going to be a long-term thing. And even if it's not a long-term thing, you want to ultimately find someone that gets to know you. And then when something's wrong, you can go and see them and you've got a good relationship with them, or you feel comfortable with them, but it's not so far out of the way that it's costing you like, 2 hours of your time to drive there and all this sort of stuff. Now, for Chinese herbs only, that's not such a big a deal. Like, I send a lot of my people that ask me for a referral in the UK. There's only 2 or 3 practitioners that I know of that do the system of herbs that I do, and they're kind of spread out. So there's one guy in London, there's one guy in can't remember where exactly. I don't want to say the wrong name, but they are spread out all over the UK kind of thing, but there's not many. And so it's worthwhile sometimes, if you've got a really serious illness, like if you've got cancer, then you'll probably be willing to travel to someone who's had experience in that area. Let's say if you've got some terminal illness, or so you're kind of judging, being very broad here in what I'm saying, so that like you're judging how far you would travel for a practitioner, based on what's wrong with you, their set of expertise, what kind of treatment you're going to have. But I think in general, you should definitely look for someone who's committed to ongoing learning in some way. Now, they don't have to be necessarily engaged in a study of a formal course of study, but there's some practitioners that just do their course, and you can tell that they just don't really care that much about what's going on in, hello, Kujip from Facebook. Awesome. Some people just don't care. Some practitioners just, I wouldn't say they don't care, but they're just not as caring as much about ongoing training and ongoing kind of an investment in their ongoing learning, I would say. And that could be in lots of different ways. So one of the reasons why I got into teaching when I was really first started practicing, pretty much, like I started out teaching Chinese massage at a private college, and I was doing that for many years. And it was like putting myself in hot water, because students would ask me questions. I had no idea what the answer was. And I would have to go home and study it. And it would just keep me committed to learning, but keep you on your toes, because you kind of have to know, and you kind of have to think about things. And you go into teaching a class, let's say, when it's only been maybe 3 or 4 years since you've learned it yourself, and you're really kind of immersing yourself in that knowledge again, you're thinking, what does this really mean? And so there can be lots of ways of practitioners being committed to ongoing learning. Some practitioners, like all practitioners, have to do what they call CPD, continuing professional development, like educational points, which is like 20 hours a year of some kind of ongoing learning. So yeah, that's kind of one thing. I guess if you're looking at herbal medicine, the course of study that I did was called ICEAM, or I always get this muddled up, Institute of Classics in East Asian Medicine. Some people call it the ice cream course, because the acronym sounds like ice cream. And so if you go on their website, there are some practitioners there that you can find, or you can send me an email if you want to find a herbalist that does the kind of style of herbs that I do. So that's basically checking the pulse and prescribing the herbs on that way. And certainly with that system of herbs, you'd often have to see a practitioner maybe once a fortnight or even once a month for maybe 2 or 3 times, and then you might get onto a formula. It's like more of a maintenance thing, and you might not need to see them until, you could just collect the herbs, or they could post them out to you or whatever like that. Now, some practitioners kind of operate a lot more in that way, and other practitioners like, no, you have to come in and see me, and you have to have a consultation. Like, I tend to have a lot of patients of mine that don't have to come in for a consultation, but there can be times where they might have had herbs for like 3 or 4 repeats, and then I'll tell them, look, I can't keep repeating this for you. If something has changed now, we kind of we need to check your pulse again to sort of see what's happening, especially if the formula is not working. But if there's something where it's it's been working well, you don't have to necessarily have a consultation and keep coming in. And that might be something to discuss with your practitioner when you first go in. So check out on my YouTube channel, there's a page called there's a video called How to Find a Good Practitioner, How to Find a Good Herbalist, and there's one that's called How to Find a Good Acupuncturist. You guys are all welcome to put questions in the comments, either in the YouTube or the Twitch or the Facebook. And I'll answer them. But I've got quite a few questions to answer off the channel anyway. Like there's always way more questions than I can answer, and that's why I thought I'd do some of these live streams, because then I can kind of get through a few questions at once. Because when I record my videos, it takes a long time to edit them and all the rest of it, and then next thing you know, a week has gone past, and people are like, "Oh, you never answered me." Having a little glass of wine, since it's kind of the night time for me now. Sort of, this is my relaxation, answering your questions. All right. So we've answered the one of YouTube that was talking about how to eat more fruit in the diet. And look, the other thing I want to add to that was that you don't have to have fruit. Like you don't have to eat fruit. Just like you don't have to eat dairy, you don't have to eat meat. Look, it is good to have a variety of stuff, and certainly in winter, that would be a season where you wouldn't really need to eat much raw fruit at all. Like you could have maybe some bananas, you could have, you want to think about fruits that store for a long time. That's what you would have in winter because it's naturally, things like mangoes and stone fruits and things like that that go off really easily without storage, without cold storage. Aren't designed to last a long time. But if the weather's cold, let's say, and you keep an apple, I mean, if you keep an apple in the fridge, if it can last for up to sort of 2 years. Like sometimes the supermarkets keep them in there for a long time. Hi Felicia, nice to see you. If you've got a question, pop it in the comments. I'd love to answer your questions. So that's something to always consider with Chinese medicine. You want to base it against nature. Well, what happens naturally in nature? So that's why things like pears and apples can kind of last a long time, and they tend to be better for you than mangoes and tropical fruits they simply won't grow in the winter. And the other kind of fruit that's really good for you in winter is berries, right? So berries are typically the fruit that you would forage for in winter, and that might still even grow, in these briery kind of bushes and things like that, even though it's frozen or things are cold or very snowy or something like that. So berries are good from two perspectives in Chinese medicine. One is because they can grow in those seasons, so they're okay to have in a colder season. But because they're darker coloured, anything that's black, like blackberries, blueberries, anything that's dark blue, dark black, dark red, is considered a blood tonic kind of fruit or food, right? So they're full of antioxidants on the other side of things, right? In a Western perspective, in their biomedicine nature, and that helps with skin repair, which is a blood deficiency type of problem anyway. So there's all those kind of correlations. Someone also asked me, how about condiments like soy sauce? This was on the raw foods video that I just recently made as well. How about condiments like soy sauce, miso, and mirin? Are they bad if you have damp heat? Not sure how to add flavor to cooked foods. Well, that's a good question, because so if you're really, really suffering with if you're I've just seen your question, Felicia. I'll answer that. I'll check that in a second. If you're really, really suffering with damp heat, you would want to sort of have the bland diet and avoid the condiments. And that would be just an acute situation. It wouldn't be like months and months or something like that. Miso is a good food because it's fermented. So that's a good food to use as a condiment. And I often used to recommend that have it for myself, but also recommend it to patients who were sort of as something you could have. So miso could come in a little paste, right? And what's good about it is it can come in a tube or in a little sachet or something like that. So you can keep that in your desk at work. You can keep it in your bag or something like that. And if you get really desperate and you're hungry, all you need is some hot water and you can make a miso soup, right? And if you have some vegetables that you keep in your, because I used to be like, well, how am I going to do this? I was running a retail shop at one point and I was like, how am I going to eat healthy here? What if you don't have anything? You don't really want to, I really don't like microwaving things. So you could have some spinach or bok choy or something like that. So let's say you get a bok choy and you just cut the end off it. So you just wash it and you just have that bok choy and you just immerse that in boiling hot water. So it's blanched, right? You don't even need a kettle. All you need is a kettle and a cup, and you blanch it in the boiling hot water. And you might have some pre-cooked rice. And so you've got that rice and you heat that up, or you just have it cold. And you put this boiling hot bok choy on top and you mix it through. And then you could put the sachet of miso soup with it, and you make a kind of a soup. You could use it, make it liquidy, make a soupy thing out of it, or you could just have it, put that on as like a paste, and that creates a flavor. And the downside of miso is it can be incredibly salty. And that super salty flavor can sometimes be, well, it's definitely detrimental to your body if you have too much salty, just as it is to have too much sweet. but at the same time, you can't just eat bland all the time. So there are 5 flavors in Chinese medicine. And I was just reading today the Tao Te Ching, actually. I was reading a translation of the Tao Te Ching, and it was saying, and one of the chapters is talking about how it's detrimental, like people that consume all the flavors, it's ultra detrimental. I might just get that little passage out because it was so interesting. And what I love about those texts is sometimes these things are so ancient, but they're so relevant because people back at the Han Dynasty and pre-Han Dynasty, when this text was made, here we go, chapter 12, were suffering with the same excesses and the same things we have now, just in a different way, right? Okay, they didn't have Twinkies and packets of food like we have now, but they still had excesses, right? They still suffered with excesses. And even it talks about, like in here, like excesses of gambling and excesses of like too many colors and flavors and things in this chapter 12 of the Tao Te Ching. So if you're not familiar with that, like people who studied Chinese medicine were expected to read and know these texts. Like there was 5 kind of scholarly texts, and Tao Te Ching is one of those texts. And like the Tao is translated as the way, right? So it's a philosophy. It's a text of philosophy, and it's a text of kind of understanding how we as human beings, almost like a moral text as well. I mean, maybe you could draw some similarities with something like the Bible in some ways. Like there's lots of this. This is probably more similarity to like the book of Proverbs in the Bible, where there's kind of like these things about these are wise people make these kinds of decisions, and this is a kind of a wisdom. Yeah. So in this chapter 12, it says the 5 colors can make people's eyes blind. The 5 tones can make people's ears deaf. The 5 flavors can make people's mouths dull. Excessive hunting and horse racing can make people's hearts or minds become wild. Rare goods can make people's behavior corrupt. And there's several mentions about rare goods, right? Like, this idea of like this desire of stuff that, wow, I just want to get this stuff. And it becomes so, that desire, maybe unfulfilled desires, but also how that plays out in society. And then, not a good way, right? Greed and corruption and things like that. And then it says, thus the sage acts on what is inside. He does not act on what he sees. Therefore, he leaves that and chooses this. So these kind of texts are like, you've got to infer the information from them, and it's it's not a one answer for everything. But I just thought that was interesting. That was kind of brought to my attention today. For some reason, I felt like I should download a translation of the Tao Te Ching and start reading it. So to answer your question, Felicia, I have Sjogren's, and I'm torn between TCM, I'll just put this on the screen, or naturopathic medicine. Is that for your treatment or for you to study as a practitioner? Like you want to be a practitioner, or maybe both of those things. I mean, you're asking a Chinese medicine person what they think is better. I'm going to say Chinese medicine, and I'm going to say that I'm outrightly biased. But I'll give you a couple of different ideas about how they both work, and I think then you could make your own decision about what you should do if it's for a treatment kind of thing. But even if it's for a studying, right? So naturopathic medicine works on the same basis of Western medicine, of the biometric, or the for treatment. Okay, so the understanding of how your body works. Chinese medicine is a different understanding of how your body works, completely different. Now, does a Chinese medicine practitioner in modern times, like someone like myself, just completely ignore Western medicine? No, we don't. And there's probably about a third of a Chinese medicine course that practitioners would learn all about the human body and how things work, and all the kinds of biology and all the sort of drugs and pharmacology and all these kinds of things that are not strictly a part of how Chinese medicine works. So that's kind of one thing to think of. So if you've already tried, if you haven't maybe you've tried some naturopathic things, or you've tried some natural supplements, or you've tried those kinds of things. I'm not, I don't want to bag out naturopathy at all, but and I don't want to say something like I could be, what I'm saying is I could be wrong. And there are, just like in Chinese medicine, there's different practitioners, styles within that, right? But essentially, what a Chinese medicine practitioner is aiming to do, especially if you see a classical trained acupuncturist or a classical style herbalist, is what they want to do is not treat the disease or treat the symptoms. They want to raise your body's function so that then it heals itself. So it's a different philosophy and a different way of understanding. So it's the idea of like, okay, our human body is not immortal, otherwise we would never die and we'd live forever. But it has the ability to heal itself. Now, naturopathy also completely believes in that too, right? And I think, physician, heal thyself. Like you are your own doctor. And have the ability to kind of heal yourself. So when you see a naturopath, they will sometimes and predominantly kind of use this style of treatment where they'll say, right, so let's not say Sjogren's disease specifically, but something like if your body's, like they're trying to use a natural way of treating it, maybe natural methods of increasing the hormones that your body needs or reducing the hormones that your body has too much of, like that kind of stuff. Whereas within Chinese medicine, we're kind of looking at things in a completely different way. So we look at the symptoms that you have. So often in Sjogren's, people have really dry, like they can't produce saliva, so they have really a lot of dryness, not just in the mouth, but so thirst would be a symptom. Now, in classical Chinese medicine texts, it's not like you can open the Neijing and find, oh, here's the acupuncture prescription for Sjogren's disease, because they didn't have that terminology back then. They didn't have that understanding. But there were people with dry mouths. And there were conditions with those things. They just didn't have those diagnoses for that. And particularly for herbal medicine. And that's how a Chinese medicine practitioner kind of thinks about it. So not trying to make a claim that we can treat these problems, because certainly for Chinese medicine, classical style practitioners, we don't even go down that road of trying to treat it. We're trying, like treating the illness. We're trying to raise your body's function so that then it's able to kind of do what it needs to do. And the benefit of that style of treatment is that over a period of time, you shouldn't be reliant on something to replace something your body's needing, right? You shouldn't be like, okay, oh, I don't have saliva, so you take this natural supplement and now you'll produce saliva. But when you stop, what happens when you stop taking that natural supplement, right? Does it just that might moisten your mouth and make you feel better? Now, sometimes with an acupuncturist or a herbalist, they might give you treatment to ease the symptoms as well. So if I had a patient that came in, they were in extreme pain, but there was also like a functional reason why that was happening, if there's something you could do to relieve the pain, you would surely do that, right? And there's lots of things with acupuncture we would do to kind of ease the pain. So we might simultaneously try to treat the symptoms, or even with herbs, like there's things where you can use herbs within the formula that kind of more treat the symptoms, but then the basis of the formula is actually to kind of treat the cause of the problem. Like, and by treating the cause, I don't mean attacking the disease. I mean enabling the body's natural ability to function properly, and then your body's kind of doing what it needs to do. So a classical herbalist kind of will say things like, well, look, we'll check your pulse and then we'll give you the herbs, and it's up to your body to kind of do what it's going to do. And then you won't know until that happens. Now, I might see lots and lots of patients with those same things, so you kind of have an expectation of what's going to happen, but you really don't know until that person takes it. And that's why also there's like, it's not like, oh, here's the Sjogren's herbal medicine. It doesn't work like that, because you could have 5 patients with the same illness in China, in a Western medicine sense, but they all could end up with needing different herbs because their constitutions are different. Like some people are very thin and some people are very fat, and some people are very so they might have more moisture in their body, and some people might be more dry in general. The reason why someone's got dryness could be like, there could be lots of reasons why someone's got dryness, not just one reason. Like maybe they're drinking a lot but their body can't absorb the moisture. And then you could have someone that's just not drinking enough, and maybe because they just don't even have a thirst, they don't even have a desire to kind of drink. So hopefully that answers your question. That all that talking about thirsty has made me want to get some water. I'm just gonna stop for 1 second, and I'll answer your question in a sec, Kirsty. This with your scallop tongue, and let me just quickly scroll down here. Maybe we should answer this one and then come back to the tongue piercing one. I'm just going to get a bottle of water. 1 second. Yep. It's making me feel thirsty. Yeah, so to just put this microphone back on. Yeah, you said you have no which one? Here we go. No dryness and you're fatigued and chronic pain. Yeah, so there's lots of different permutations of, so within, like, your practitioner would ask you all the questions and work out the diagnosis from there. So I'm not trying to generalize it. Okay, can we combine TCM with naturopathic medicine to treat something? So look, technically you can. Why would you need to? What I would tell my patients is with herbs, if you try 2 new things at once, so you go and see a naturopath, this happens a lot to patients I see, right? Because they think, oh, I'm going to get everything sorted out and I'm going to go and see a naturopath, and then I'm going to see Marie. And sometimes they just think I'm an acupuncturist. They don't realize I do Chinese herbs. And so they've just been loaded up with all these different prescriptions from a naturopath. So if you're taking a lot of new stuff at once and then you take Chinese medicine, and that's also a new thing, the herbalist, like me, I won't know what's working or what's making you worse if something happens. So let's say we check your pulse. Roughly, this is how we kind of think about things. If you've been taking a medication for a long time, whether it be a natural medication, whether it be a naturopathic medication, whether it be like something over the counter, so you might have had vitamins or something like that. Especially if a practitioner highly relies on the pulse and is kind of skilled in kind of checking the pulse, then whatever you're finding there is what the body, like, I don't want to sound too esoteric here, but that's what the body kind of wants to be treated or needs to be treated. So this is the idea of treating the yang stuff before you treat the yin stuff, treating the functional before you treat the material stuff. And so you check the pulse, and let's say it seems like that person needs harmonizing, which would be a treatment methodology. Now, that you would know that because certain qualities on the pulse would come out, like that you would notice in certain positions on different sides. And then you give them those herbs and they have the opposite reaction to what should happen, right? So they feel worse, which sometimes can happen. It's a very small amount of people that happens. And in my system of herbs, that kind of means something. So it means like they actually need the opposite of that formula. And that's kind of very, very, very useful information. So if I was to suspect that would happen, I'd usually tell a patient that at the start. But sometimes it could just happen sort of without you expecting it. Now, if a person's taking 2 or 3 new things, you don't know what's caused this reaction, especially if people have very chronic problems and like, they say that, oh, I'm very sensitive to things, and, you wouldn't know, is it the herbs? Is it the naturopathic stuff? Likewise, if it's something's making it better, the person could be spending a lot of money on both of these things and not necessarily needing that amount of both of them. So I would I'll be aware, Joanna, of doing 2 new things at once. Even with acupuncture, like, a lot of people come to it because they think, well, nothing's going to go in my body, So, but if you're doing like a course of acupuncture treatment, you want to know how effective that is. And like, just like as in a research trial, right, you want as little variables as possible, less variables, so you can actually assess whether this thing is working or how it's working for you and what it's doing. But if you've been taking supplements and, like, let's say you've been taking naturopathic stuff for a while, and I see patients like this too, and they've been on those things for a long time, like months and months or more than that, and pretty much maybe the dose might change a little bit, or they might manage some of their symptoms. If something flares up, they might take this kind of supplement, but in general they take the same things. Well, if you're adding herbs into the mix there, it won't be such a big deal, because you kind of already have a baseline of what things are like, and the pulse is kind of reflecting everything that they're taking right at that moment. So what I'm getting at is, you can't check their pulse and then for that to reflect something new that they take the next day. It doesn't work like that. Yeah. So that's that kind of question. Now we'll come back to Kristy's one, Kristy K. Good to see so many people on here. So if you haven't noticed, I'm on Twitch now. This is the first time I've done a Twitch stream, and I'm streaming it out to everywhere. So Chrissy says, I've got a scalloped tongue. I've had a scalloped tongue for months and months. I would love it if you could share some insight and tips with me. And also she says in the next comment, I've had a tongue piercing for many years. So tongue piercing, let's talk about piercings. A piercing, I don't think is going to cause your tongue to be scalloped for sure. Now, it might cause your tongue to be a bit puffier if it was inflamed around the piercing, not for years and years, right? And so how do you get a scalloped tongue? Well, what is a scalloped tongue? So firstly, it's another word for it is tooth marked. It can be because basically the person doesn't this is how we think about it in Chinese medicine. I made a video on this once on the channel, and a dentist person jumped on, or a dental nurse, and she's like, "You're wrong. That's not what it's about." That's like, it's okay. This is the Chinese medicine understanding of it. So everything on this channel, if you didn't know about it, if you didn't realize that before, it's all Chinese medicine, right? And so yeah, you can have two actual theories of how things work that are simultaneously both correct at the same time. Just different ways of thinking about how the body works. It doesn't mean just because your theory is right doesn't make my theory kind of wrong, actually. Like, anyway, just prefacing that. I'm sure people watching right now and the streamer, or like dental nurses trying to catch me out, like something like that. So when you first get a piercing, it can act a little bit like an acupuncture stimulation, right? And so you're continuously stimulating a point. And this happens on the ears, right? Especially if you've got redness, irritation, inflammation, that kind of thing about that. I know some practitioners who don't like that. I met someone who noticed I had a navel piercing, and they said, "Oh, you'll never be able to get pregnant with that," or something like that. And I was like, "What? I'm not trying to get pregnant." But they were like, "Well, I always tell my fertility patients to take out their piercings because it's interfering with the flow of qi in that area," or something like that. I'm not one of these people to kind of go down that woo-woo road as much as others. And I'm not dismissing that completely, because there could be some validity to that. But I certainly think, for one, like when you first get a piercing, it irritates the area and it acts like there's this stimulation. So if you've ever had acupuncture, you'll notice that you get a sensation from it, right? And then that sensation dies away. So if the practitioner doesn't come back and stimulate the needles, nothing is kind of happening. After a while, your body just pushes the needles out of you, right? Now, it doesn't push out the piercing, but after a while, your body gets used to it, and the inflammation and the redness and all the swelling and all that stuff goes down. But having that metal in your body in that area could possibly be an irritation to the channels. Now, what's on your tongue, in the center of your tongue, is like your Ren channel kind of coming up here. So your conception vessel and your Du channel kind of converging, like basically the yin and the yang cycle of your body. So it's possible, let's just say that, it's possible that a tongue piercing could cause some disturbance of the channels, let's say. But I don't think it's going to cause a scalloped tongue. So it might have caused that initially if this tongue got really swollen and then you were biting down on the edges. So this is how Chinese medicine thinks a scalloped tongue occurs, is you might have dampness, and then your tongue grows fatter. So the preceding the dampness is you just have an imbalance or an inability to digest and metabolize fluids properly. And so the tongue grows bigger and you bite down on the sides. And that's why a scalloped tongue or a puffy tongue or a tooth-marked tongue is all considered part of a spleen qi deficiency diagnosis in Chinese medicine. That's one of the signs, one of the big major signs. So I'm not sure what insights you'd like about your tongue. The tongue whisperer. What would you like to know? Is there something more you'd like to know? If you're still here, you can ask some more detail, because I'm not sure what you'd like to know. Are you asking sort of what does it mean? Can it go away? Yeah, so it's part of the diagnosis of spleen qi deficiency, which is simultaneously linked to dampness. So if your spleen isn't able to digest, which means it can't transform and transport both food and fluids, then it's the fluid metabolism that's suffering. So what happens to the fluids that aren't being transformed? That's how dampness kind of accumulates. That's the philosophy of it. So I know most people are in the awake stage now. This is the night time for me. So I'm just having a relaxing chat with people. I've been very busy lately, and I just haven't had time to make as many videos as I would like to. So I thought I'd do some of these streams to answer people's questions, get some of the questions done. Are there any foods, she asks? It's taking a little bit of time to come onto this one. Yep, here we go. Are there any foods I should be consuming or avoiding to help with spleen qi deficiency? Yeah, so, I mean, the cooked foods diet is the first place to start. So firstly, avoiding too much raw, avoiding too much cold. If your bowels are, so with spleen qi deficiency, they could either be just a tendency to loose or completely loose. Now, you don't have to put that, don't put that in the comments of what your bowels are like. Just, you don't need to put the details there. But if the looser things are, the less formed they are, the less yang you've got to keep them formed. And so that in that case, then you want to kind of completely try to avoid the raw and the cold foods. But foods that you can eat. So a paleo diet is probably the closest to a healthy diet in Chinese medicine. Now, I kind of say that with a little bit of reservation, because not talking about, when some people hear the word paleo diet, think, oh, it's just the meat diet. I'm going to eat a lot of meat, a carnivore diet. You still want mostly plant-based. You still want lots and lots of vegetables. But generally, you'd be cooking things, and you'd still the other thing that's really good is bone broth. So if you are a vegetarian, sometimes that's the reason why the spleen qi deficiency happens. So if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, then you would want to have more blood tonic vegetable types of foods. You could try to have, like, if you're not a vegan, you might be able to have royal jelly. So these are things that tonify blood inevitably will help tonify the spleen, right? Because the spleen makes blood. That's its other function. So people think, oh, I've got spleen qi deficiency, but what about the spleen making blood? That's, the other side of it. I'm a vegetarian. I'm so sorry. I feel terrible saying, because I just know, because not that I don't know you, but I used to be a vegetarian too. I was a vegetarian for like 9 years, and I got teased all through Chinese medicine school, like, you got to eat meat, you're going to be weak and feeble and all this kind of stuff. And and eventually I just did eat meat because I just felt like I needed to eat meat. But the whole time I was vegetarian, I couldn't stomach meat. I used to have, when I started being vegetarian as a youngster, in my family, like, I bought a separate fridge and put it in my bedroom at one point, because mum used to buy meaty things and the juice would drip down and it might touch on the vegetables, and I just couldn't have anything to do with that. And so I got my own secondhand fridge and kept all my vegetables separate to the rest of the family when I was like 16 or 17 in our house till I moved out. So if you're not a vegan and you're vegetarian, I'd really suggest what's good is bone broth. Oh, sorry, not bone broth. Forget that. Is uh, the royal jelly. And I used to eat quite a lot of that when I was studying Chinese medicine. So you can go down to Chinese Oriental kind of food shops and get this thing called royal jelly. It comes in little vials and it's like a super, super blood tonic kind of food. Anything that's dark colored, like mentioned earlier on the thing about blueberries, blackberries, those kinds of things. And then all of your root vegetables, like things like pumpkin and turnip and parsnip, they all tonify the earth, which is your spleen. So those things are really, really good. Look, it depends on how committed you are to your health over time. So I've had some vegetarians that'll be like, oh, I could have some bone broth here or there. Now, when I've made bone broth, I did a video on this channel making bone broth, and the smell of it would have just put me off completely when I was a vegetarian. So I can understand. I totally get that whole thing. Like if you're a vegetarian, you don't want to, like I wouldn't even eat fake meats like bacon and all that sort of stuff because I didn't want to pretend I was having meat. I wasn't like feeling like, oh, I'm missing out on meat. It was, I understand people maybe go vegetarian because they've got heart disease or something and they wish they could have a sausage. So they love these fake tofu sausages. I was like, I didn't want to eat a fake chicken or anything like that. Just didn't want anything to do with it. So, yeah, there's a couple of diet books that are good to get hold of. One's the Paul Pitchford one, and you'd probably love that because he loves vegetarianism and there's tons of veggie recipes in there. And the other thing that I'd suggest you just avoid is beans. And there's a few reasons why you want to avoid beans. One is because they drain dampness, right? And they drain out toxicity, but they also drain the nutrients out of your body when they're doing that. So if we think about it like if they're a detoxing food, you want to be detoxing when you've got toxins, but human beings don't have toxins to be detoxed all the time, and they don't need that all the time. So you don't want to be consuming a huge amount of beans if you already are. Like if I put my patients on particular Chinese herbs that are like very warm tonifying herbs, I have to tell them not to eat certain beans. Like they can't have chickpeas or red kidney beans or the 4-bean mix, any of those kind of beans in their diet in a regular basis. Like so, then that's the reason why I mentioned that because of vegetarian is because when I was a vegetarian, I used to eat tons of beans because what else is there to eat? Like they're so yummy and there's so many of them and they're so flavoursome. And sometimes in TCM they promote eating beans for tonifying blood, but really then like this is a bit of a conundrum that no one's addressing. So I wouldn't be eating too many beans. All right. So hi, Ashley. Thank you for your questions and thank you for your lovely comments. Love your channel. Thanks for all your help. That's awesome. She's asked, in TCM, they say you should change your diet every 10 years. I'm not sure about the reference for that. Like, is there a particular book or author that you mentioned that you know about that? Now, I'll tell you one thing. Chinese medicine believes a human being changes how they live, their cycles and stuff, for a man every 8 years and for a woman every 7 years. So that kind of makes sense that, every when that cycle changes, your body changes. And there's an idea, well, one is you shouldn't have the same expectations you had of yourself within those cycles. And this is where some people think, oh, I was okay until I was 45 and then, whoa, suddenly everything changed. I just suddenly got grey hair, or these things seem to appear suddenly. Or I just noticed like I was more tired, or even people that drink a lot of alcohol, they might say, oh, I could drink and drink and drink and now I can't drink hardly as much at all, right? So yeah, your diet should gradually do this kind of thing. The weaning process that you have as a baby you sometimes might need to revert to that kind of really simple, really bland diet every so often if you've overdone it, let's say. And that's a good thing to kind of revert back to if you need that. Not to have everything mushed up and totally obliviated, but just this whole idea of having like one food at a time, simple foods, you know, going back to like easy to digest, that kind of stuff. So that's a good thing to have it up your sleeve if you need to do that. But as you get older, you tend to need less food. And there's a few textbooks that I've read of like longevity books from centenarians and things like that. And usually after the age of 80, a lot of those people have a very, one is you should have a very regular diet. Like we always eat breakfast at the same time, or if you only have one meal a day, you only eat lunch, you always have that at the same time. So you have that regularity. And you generally need less food, and you generally would eat more clear, bland food, so soups and things like that. And you know, you don't need as much flavor, and you certainly don't want to overwhelm your body with, you know, excesses. People who live a long time tend to have alcohol in moderation. Let's say it's not like they could never have alcohol, but if you're having excesses all the time and excesses of food, rich foods all the time. So I'm not sure about every 10 years. And maybe if there's some kind of reference that you had for that, or some kind of book, I'll look it up, or a blog or something that you read that on. Okay, so Kristy says, I'm right with you, I didn't want to do, yeah, exactly. So I think what you have to do with the meat thing is awesome. Okay, well that's good. I'm glad I've answered your question straight away. Bang. I think with the meat thing is just be aware of your body. And like for me, it was like one day I just woke up after 9 years and I was like, I literally said, I'm going to eat meat today. I was in China and I was like, you know what? I'm going to eat meat today. And I went and ate some chicken and felt really good. And I was probably eating something else that wasn't a chicken. I don't know. But it tasted bloody delicious. And it was something that changed in me. And I was like, I was ready to eat it. But prior to that, no way. You know, okay. So Joanna's got a few things to say, a few questions. According to TCM, what should be the quantity of grains, veggies, and protein so that one should take? It's hard to understand, how much we should take of each thing. Look, everything's in balance, and there was a book that had come out. Give me 1 sec. I'm just going to run into the other room and I'll grab the book out and I'll show you. Give me literally 1 second. So this book here, if you're a practitioner or a student, you would have sort of seen this Will McLean kind of series. Sorry about the noise there. I'll just put this back on. So if you're just a layperson, there's no need to buy this book. But I just want to draw your attention to where this has been sort of talked about. So in the back of this book, they have this little bit of food stuff, and in my mind it was like, so they have this. So like for chi deficiency, like proportions of foods. And look, to be honest, they're almost the same. They're not hugely different. But I think this is the blood deficiency one. You can see there's a lot more kind of emphasis on protein. And so you could sort of think about that on your plate, right? Roughly a third. Like, so if you divide those three things into thirds, like protein, vegetables, and fruit, and carbohydrates. But for someone who's got sort of so That question really depends on your diagnosis, to be honest, Joanna, like how much you need of each one. But if you're just a healthy person, you just want to remain healthy, then I would say like a third of your diet on your plate, let's say, or maybe within the day, you could think about balancing it up like that, should be protein. And then carbohydrates, and then vegetables and fruits. So if you could have those in thirds, like roughly, let's say. And then if you had blood deficiency, you'd probably have a bit more protein, a bit more like meat, if you could have that, if you don't want a vegetarian. And then reduce down the other things. It also changes seasonally, right? So in some seasons, like you want to have more heavier foods. Like in winter, you can have a lot more heavier, denser foods. In summer, you want to have a lot more lighter kinds of foods. Oops, I'm losing my book. Yeah, the idea with Chinese medicine in a general sense is everything in balance. Yep. So let's say you have a pasta one day, right? And you're like, okay, I know that's a bit rich. I know that's a bit dampening. Well, the next day, kind of, or like you've had 2 or 3 rich meals, try to see if you can get your body to recover within, a few days of having that. If you notice that that's detrimental to you. Now, how could you notice that? Like some people eat these richer foods and their skin breaks out, or they've had a lot of sugar or salty foods, and their skin gets puffy because they've had a lot of salty foods. So like you can try to balance that out, and the way you could balance that back is just go onto that clear, bland diet. So go on like soups that you've cooked yourself, have that for a couple of meals, see if you can kind of almost reset your digestion and feel better about it again. But if you're having, like, let's say you're having like sort of steak or some kind of protein, like cooked fish or chicken or steak or something like that, and a portion of veggies, and you could just do that and have the carbohydrates as the carbier kinds of veggies. If you're trying to lose weight and you want to be on a more high protein diet, there's actually nothing wrong with that kind of diet. You don't have to stuff your body full of carbohydrates, but certainly better to get the carbohydrates from either the raw grains, like the pure grains, like rice or millet or quinoa or something like that, cooked grains, rather than like bread or pasta as a processed kind of food. Do we always need to eat grains together with meat, for instance? No. And you look at how Chinese people eat in general, there's a big difference in different provinces. And because like in some provinces, it can be very hot and humid, and in other provinces, it's very cold. And I'm not saying that they're sort of the perfect example, but certainly in rural China, they eat very according to it's very healthy, according to Chinese medicine kind of ways. In the cities, they just eat how we eat like now. And, like I've been going to China for maybe, I think I've been there 11 times over since 2001 till last time I went was 2 years ago. I would have gone last year, but the virus and all that couldn't go. Like it's only been in the last 3 or 4 years I've ever seen overweight people in China. Like, just it's because of Western food and Western influences. Whereas before they didn't and they would eat a lot of rice, and they would have a lot of exercise, do a lot of walking, and not strenuous exercise. Like even in China, like before 5 years ago, they didn't have gyms, right? So how would they exercise? They're not pumping weights at a gym, right? I mean, there's some people that do pretty strenuous exercise in using their body weight and doing martial arts and stuff like that. But a lot of people just do walking, and they're just cycling on their bike and just keeping fit in that way. Just not overeating. So you can eat grains and still be a healthy size, but it's just about whether you're kind of overeating. And if you can avoid eating lots of these processed kind of foods that are so delicious and tasty as snacks and things like that, then you can afford to have some grains in your diet and not be worried, I have to avoid having, carbohydrates and stuff. You mentioned paleo, so we can look at the paleo. Yeah. Wow, that's a good question. The household herb. I don't know if I have an answer for that one yet. Um, okay, a few questions here. You mentioned paleo. Yes, so you can look at the paleo diet through a Chinese medicine perspective. It's probably the closest thing to a healthy like diet, and I've heard lots of Chinese medicine practitioners kind of say that. Now, not super, like you've got extremes of paleo where um, the good things about paleo is you don't really need to eat a lot of dairy products, right? If you can avoid them and you feel happy and you can live life without them, that's good. Um, you don't really need to eat a lot of sugar, and so they're the two things that you're just kind of cutting out instantaneously in the paleo. And then you're kind of just having a free for all with the other kind of foods, right? And lectins is the other big thing. So with all the beans and the lentils and that's just such a big because it's draining that damp and it's not it shouldn't be those foods shouldn't be an everyday kind of food. Look, there's always extremes to things as well, like differs to the rule. Like look at Indian culture; they live off of beans and lentils, and there's some sections of the population that are highly healthy, but the other side to the Indian kind of diet is highly spicy, right? And that spice is really warming, so that warms your gut, and that's kind of good. So when you say blueberries, should we cook them? No, you don't need to. Look, you don't need to cook everything. you can if you want to, or you could just throw them into something warm, right? So if you had a porridge, you could throw them into that. Um, like you don't have to have everything cooked. You can have some things raw, and um, like blueberries aren't really like super sweet, so they're not going to cause you a lot of dampening issues because it's the fruits that are tropical fruits and very sweet and sticky, kind of sweet and syrupy that are the most dampening ones. Awesome, love the channel, thank you. All right, so yep. And look, I understand like there's different teachers might say different things because there's a few things in Chinese diet textbooks. So if you are a student and you've got this book or you've got hold of these, this is one of the best. This is the best series, I reckon. It's better than Giovanni ones for clinical treatments of patients. This is an Australian guy, and there's three in the series. One's got a pulse picture on the front. One's got something else on it. He's actually redone the series, and it's like in one big giant book now, I think. Will McLean. So that's a really useful book for students. Yep. Well, you could do both. You could build the blood first and work on the spleen chi. There's no reason why you have to do one or the other. And they kind of work simultaneously anyway, right? In a way, if you don't like your spleen chi is what's making blood, because how do you make blood? Out of the ability for your spleen to transform and transport. Squish your nose with your finger and flare your nostrils at the same. I don't know what that means. I don't know what that's in. Is that you want me to do that or? Anyway, sorry, I just read that comment. I'm not sure what you're trying to say there, Carl. So building blood and tonifying the spleen chi. So by supporting the spleen's function, you're allowing it to work the best it's going to work. And then you put the nutrients in that are going to tonify the blood. And this is where the difficulty of like, if someone gets severely blood deficient and they're a vegan, there's not much left to make blood out of, realistically. I've seen lots of practitioners, and even when I've taught Chinese diet therapy, I've seen it sort of filter through the curriculum now, like, oh, don't be mean to vegans and vegetarians. Like, not that people are trying to be mean to them, but work out other options for people. on one hand, that is, you can't sort of deny that that is the part of the course, and you have to tell your patients that, hey, that's part of it. Now, it doesn't mean people need to eat tons and tons of meat, but there's yang in those foods because it come from an animal. There's a lot of yang. It kind of, yeah, does that. So, yeah. What's the single best household herb for acid reflux in TCM? I feel like I need to go to the cupboard and look. You wouldn't want to know what, like, if I told you what my household herbs are, they're not the same as what everyone else has. Because I have a lot of Chinese herbs in my cupboard. So Chinese medicine, for a start, doesn't work like that. Why have you got the reflux? I could give you some exercises you could do, like a little Twainer self-massage exercise. So what you want to do is where your epigastric area is, so just under your ribs here, so just joining your fingers together, and then drawing a line from there down to your belly button. So I'll just stand back a little bit, pretty much where that microphone cord is. So you're basically just rubbing down. And what you're doing is you're helping the qi or the yang to kind of descend down that area. And look, it should be not painful, but like almost warm. And you could use the flat part of your hand to kind of go downwards like that. Now, if you do this the opposite way, if you do this upwards, and you could do it like this, that can make you vomit. So you'll know, and I'm not even doing it hard because I don't want to push all my qi up, because I've done it before when I've eaten something bad. You know, when you eat some bad food and you feel like, oh, I could just, like, you're overseas and you think, I could just be sick. I'll get rid of all this horrible toxins that I've eaten. And that's a way to kind of push the qi upwards. So it also then descends the stomach qi. Now, reflux in part is due to rebellious stomach qi. So what that means is your stomach qi should descend. When it's rebellious, it's going up. So what do you want to do? You want to descend it. And you could do that exercise before you eat. You could do it just several times a day. Certainly if you had pain or you had the tightness, you could kind of do that. But I can't really suggest sort of one herb because it doesn't work like that. I've had some patients where I've used ginger, like a lot of ginger in their formula, but not ginger is just by itself in the food. But that's a very strongly warming herb for the stomach, and that's a much more classical approach to, like in TCM, they would say no, don't have ginger. They'd say have something really cooling. And don't have those warming foods, but you kind of like sometimes the stomach area or the esophagus kind of contracts, or underneath, if people have GERD or something like that, there can be a contraction happening there because of cold. And so you basically want to warm the stomach and let it relax. So you probably need to go and see your practitioner to get the TCM or the herbal medicine kind of diagnosis, and then kind of support that with foods. And so yeah, J1. Hopefully we can heal ourselves. Yes, I hope you can. Oh, you're living for this life. That's good. I don't need to highlight everyone's comment. Oh, yeah, it's just like a new toy for me. All these comments. Any TCM books or resources I'd recommend. So you're obviously a student, I think you are. So now you eat meat and try to look into everything through a TCM lens. Yeah. Well, it kind of, yeah, that's a good one. I don't have that text, I don't think, but it is a good one. So you're a student, right? Yep, I'm assuming that you are. There's so many books. I don't know where to start. I feel like you could never have too many books. Like, I've got so many books, I can't keep them all on my shelves now. They're just everywhere. So there's a really good textbook. What year of study are you in? And are you doing herbs and acupuncture or just acupuncture? or just herbs. There's a really good book I recommend to my students, which I used when I was studying. So it's been around a long time, since like my teacher used it with us back in like 1998 or whatever. So it's called Patterns and Practice. I'm going to just try to look it up so I can get the author right. Yep. I've just found it, a copy of it on eBay. There's a couple of different versions of this book. Where are we? I'm just going to put the comment in there. So that's for students, right? That recommendation. What that book does is it goes through case studies in a really big detail. So about 3 or 4 pages of case studies of pages on each case. And it's a big book. It's like an A4 size. And it dissects the case down, and it says, like, this page like gives you the diagnosis. So it says it'll have abdominal distension or something like that, right? So that could fit into the reflux kind of question that we were just asked. And then it'll say diagnosis, spleen qi deficiency and liver qi stagnation. And you're like, okay, great, that's good, but I don't understand, how do you know they have that? And then they ask these questions like, why does this patient have spleen qi deficiency and not spleen yang deficiency? Or why do they have qi deficiency and not blood deficiency? And it's really good. Like, there's a little paragraph there, and it'll kind of explain the difference between those things. So especially if your course is all about Zhang Fu patterns and you're struggling to do that, the number one thing I always tell my students to do is you just memorize those Zhang Fu patterns, the symptoms and the signs and the pulse and the tongue, particularly, the signs and symptoms that are like the differential symptoms of those patterns of disharmony. Because that if you know those things, then when a patient comes into your student clinic and you're starting to try to make a diagnosis, if those, like they say, you notice they have sighing, let's say, right? So then you automatically, your brain's thinking, well, what are the other symptoms that us, if sighing's what sighing are part of, I know it's part of liver qi stagnation. What are the other symptoms that go along with that? Oh, okay, hypochondrial, pain. They feel better when they do exercise. So then you could ask them the questions like, do you have pain in your heart? Like, maybe you'd say hypochondria, but you say, do you have pain in your around your ribs or tightness there? If you do exercise, do you feel better after, or do you feel more tired? Those kind of questions. Yeah. So is that what you're studying? You're studying herbs and nutrition, like as in Chinese herbs, Chinese herbal medicine? Or are you just like interested in Chinese medicine separately? What country are you in, Ashley? Okay, let me go back to these questions. Yeah, I'm not sure about that one, Carl. I don't know what you're saying. I'm not going to do that. I feel like something weird will happen. So Joanna says, I was a vegetarian and a vegan, then went to macrobiotic, and that was the worst experience of my body. Yeah. Yep. And that's the detriment of that book. I mentioned it before, Healing with Whole Foods, Paul Pitchford. It's a great book. I still use it, and I use it when I teach Chinese diet therapy. But he's big on macrobiotics, and that's kind of like not in line with Chinese medicine. So you're just going to have to dismiss that aspect of it. I think with all things with nutrition and Chinese herbs, oh, that's cool. I love it, because that's why I was like, what are you studying like in that way? Because I've never heard of nutrition with. So is it Chinese diet therapy, or is it like nutrition as in Western nutrition? Like you'll be a nutritionist and a Chinese herbalist. That's kind of really cool. That's probably highly useful. Really interesting. So yeah, I don't know what I was saying before that. Yeah. Oh, the diet stuff. Like in a general sense, for Chinese diet therapy, and health in Chinese medicine, like how to eat healthily, let's say, it's just about a balance. It's not about extreme. So as soon as you go on a diet and you stick into an extreme thing, you always have the possibility, because you've excluded these foods, there might be stuff that you should be having there. And also, because you're excluding those foods, you're tending to have a lot of some other foods, maybe too much of those foods. So it's all about kind of like, could you share the picture of the proportions? Yeah, from this little book here. You could take a screenshot of it, I guess. I don't know if you can. And look, some of these things I can kind of agree with. And what I used to do for my patients is, I'll go to the start one. Qi deficiency. That's qi deficiency. Yang deficiency. That's yang deficiency. So if you're taking a screenshot, then you can just do that after the video, I guess. Yin deficiency. So you can see in yin deficiency, they're saying you could have different kinds of protein, like, because typically when people are yin deficient, they've got more dryness, or they need more moisturization, so they could have more nuts and stuff. Now, in this qi stagnation, I've also seen people do really well on like paleo, high meat, like keto kind of diet with qi stagnation as well. Because when you're having carbs like that, sugar, I think it's also because people with qi stagnation can't, they're just so addicted to, not all of them, but it's hard not to be addicted to the more bready kind of foods. So I think these aren't the be all and end all. That one was dampness and phlegm, heat and fire. Yeah. So they're kind of using the same strategy of heat and fire to qi stagnation. I probably wouldn't use some of these things, and then that's it. And then, yeah. Like, there's some things where Chinese diet therapy is super duper really important. One is blood deficiency, and half of that problem is just if people are vegan or vegetarian, well, that's probably how they got there. And if you can solve that, then, and sometimes even if they just get on herbs, let's say, because they want it, and they're not going to change their diet, but they might be able to stop having the herbs later on if they did change their diet. When I was a vegetarian, I used to have a lot of, like, I used to do a lot of cooking with herbs. Like, I would do cooking with dangui, one of the Chinese blood tonic herbs. And you could just buy dangui down at the Chinese food shop. There's another little formula that you can use. I'll put it in here. So, people have kind of mentioned before when I've said Chinese words, they're like, can you write that out? I was like, oh, I forgot that people can't work that out, because I probably couldn't work it out either when I was a student. So Suwutang is a blood tonic formula. Now, these are like 4 herbs, Su meaning 4, that you can just buy as a packet, like a soup herbs mixture. Now, what I would do when I was a vegetarian is, and I mean, I still do this now, but I might just put chicken stock into the soup or something like that, is get those 4 herbs and one of those vegetarian soup packs, which is like got a turnip, a parsnip, a bit of celery, onion, something like that, and mix all that together and make a stock and cook that over a few hours, right? And just make a nice stock. And then I would strain all that out. And then because you certainly can't have the herbs in the main thing because they're all sticky. Sometimes I'd leave them in and people be eating the soup and like, oh, what's this old stick in there, Marie? And I'd be like, oh, just eat around it. This is not good to serve that up because people can choke on those things and stuff like that as well. Now, if you can't be bothered sifting all this stuff out, you can put the herbs into a muslin bag, like a little cloth kind of bag, like a Hessian sackie kind of thing, and dip that into the soup stock, and then you can just take that out. So you take all this stuff out and you're left with this liquid, which is your stock. And that's essentially acting now as like what you would like a bone broth in a way, like it's this really strong stock. And then you can use that to cook your other things, or you can then, I would usually just make a pumpkin soup because that's what I used to like the most. So I'd get like a butternut pumpkin and just cook that up as a soup. And that's it. Bob's your uncle. You've got a blood tonic-y kind of soup. And when you cook the pumpkin, you can actually add back in the bits of turnip and parsnip and the root vegetables. You can add that all back in because that's all delicious to eat. You don't need to discard all that, but you kind of just would add that little. So the packet of herbs is, just a little bag like this of the 4 herbs in Suwaltung is like shu di, dungwei, baishao, and chuan shong. Now, there's 3 herbs that are technically blood tonic herbs, and they're all vegetarian things. They're not like weird animal parts or anything. And the other one is a blood moving herb. Chuan shong is like a blood moving herb, and that's a very good just a blood tonic formula, like a thing to cook with. And if the other thing you could then use that for is if you made it like a chowder, a really thick kind of chowder, I would often freeze that, especially if you're just a one person, or like I used to cook a lot for myself because in my family, everyone else was eating the meat and I was not eating the meat. And so you'd be like, well, I'm not cooking up this whole meal every day for myself. I don't have time. So I would cook stuff up and freeze those soups. And then you could use those soups as stock to flavor other things. So if you were making something like a curry, or you're making something like, I don't know, like a risotto or something like that, you could kind of use them as the flavors. Cool. All right. Well, sounds good. This has been a very interesting stream. Hopefully everyone's having a good time. The course in Canada sounds amazing. Sounds really good. Feel free to share it on the stream. That's no problem to share the links. I'm sure it's fine. YouTube will be like, no, shutting you down. I'm sure it'll be fine. If it's blocked, I'll release the blockage. Sometimes they do block those links. God, I get so many people commenting on the channel about, oh, you wouldn't believe my herpes was cured. They're obviously spammers and scammers, and they just automatically get blocked now. But like every day, there's at least 3 people cured of herpes by these miracle drugs, and they put the same text and everything in there. And it's just so unbelievable, because when I read those things, I'm just like surely if you really had herpes, you're not going to jump onto random YouTube channels and tell everyone about your illness. Certainly not your herpes. It just makes me laugh. Like, even though it's the same text every time, it just makes me laugh about it. Cool. So that sounds good. The course sounds really interesting. And look, certainly nutrition, and like where I teach at my college in Perth, they have probably, I'd say maybe even half the students at the whole college, because they teach naturopathy, nutrition, acupuncture, at least half are studying nutrition. It's a very popular course, and I think there's going to be a huge market for those kinds of things in the future, and certainly for things where, like, if you can create something where you can enable people to be helped all over the world, let's say, or you create courses, or you create self-help things, or I don't know, there's just so many options for that. And I think because we're so distanced from our food now. Like, there's some kids that don't even know where food comes from. They don't even know that that fruit grows on trees. They think it just all comes out of packets. Like, and they don't even realize about cows and where, like, I mean, I didn't grow up on a farm or anything, but at least we kind of had a bit more of an awareness. You would visit people, friends. We had friends who had farms, and like, you knew that chickens laid eggs. But there's just it's so distancing from your food, I guess, is just even one thing. And then people there's so many choices, they don't know what to choose. And then, how do you make good, healthy decisions for yourself? Anyway, this has been very fun, this stream. It's great to see some people on the different platforms. So if you're a Twitch user and you like Twitch, I'll be doing these streams and sending it out to all of the places. So we'll be just answering people's questions about Chinese medicine. And I'm probably going to leave it at that now because it's getting quite late for me. And I've been doing this for a few hours. Well, not a few hours, but an hour and a half. So hopefully that's answered your question. Answered all your questions. And as usual, if you've got other questions and you're just watching this after the fact, or you are popping on, oh, thank you, Ashley, you're the best. Put that up on the screen. That's a good one to end on. Oh, thanks for following my social medias. It always helps. Yeah, so if you know people that the channel might help, yeah, share the channel to them. Because all I want to do is just promote Chinese medicine and give people an opportunity to have, like, particularly for patients, like, to ask their questions. And I've got a few things on the YouTube channel more for students, and I'll probably do more stuff for students. And if students jump on the stream, then we can talk more about student level things. Yeah, I know that it's one of those worlds that's kind of difficult to navigate, I think, Chinese medicine. And there's so much good stuff in it, and it's something that's good to have discussions about and think about them. Yeah, and so if you want to be on the channel, I've got this thing now where I can send out a link and other people can talk on the channel. So we could share the screen. So that's a possibility. So you can always send me an email. I'll put my email in the thing here. It's Chinese Medicine Podcast at gmail.com. And so if people have something they want to email me, they can do that. Or put a comment on the channel. So thanks very much, everyone, for watching. I'm so glad this has worked. It's my first time to use this. I'm using StreamYard to do this. So it's been seamless to go out to all the different places, which is awesome. So thanks, everyone, for watching and tuning in. And I look forward to seeing you again on the next stream. Thank you. Bye.